right, so we're back again with Uzair Qidwai, the CEO of Cent Finance and also the creator of Symmetric, which is behind him right now. How you doing?
Thanks, Rob. I'm doing very well. How are you?
Doing good, doing good. So we're going to continue our conversation kind of what we started in the last video. In the last video, we kind of started getting on this topic, and I think it's a very important topic to cover, which is, what are kind of the shortcomings of DeFi? Because I mean, we always talk about all the great things. What are some of the things that are shortcomings that you see?
That's a very relevant question. This is something regulators are grappling with right now. And one of the biggest challenges for adoption of DeFi to go mainstream is anonymity and being able to do things in a completely anonymous and uncontrolled, permissionless way. It makes the regulator's job very difficult because regulation depends on centrally controlled channels. And so things like money laundering, movement of money from one sanctioned country to another, these kind of things become very difficult to control. And we've seen that in DeFi. Regulators are still trying to come up with best practices and guidance. And this is fairly common, regardless of the geography or region that you look at or refer to. It's the same issues that regulators are dealing with in North America, Europe, South America, or elsewhere. So, that I would say is one of the biggest challenge, but that's not the only challenge. With anonymous transactions and complete freedom, you also get a lot of scammers, people that portray their project to be a certain way, but they aren't really doing what they say they're doing. So there's a lot of misleading information and malicious intent that can enter this area. And so, I would say alongside regulation, the rampant presence of scammers and scam projects,
Pump and dump schemes and all kind of stuff, right?
Pump and dump schemes. Another common one that's called a rug pull in DeFi is a type of an exit scam. So these kind of things are really the main issues that DeFi is facing right now. And then, of course, you have resistance to change from users, from institutions that stand to lose a lot from adoption of this type of technology. So I would say, these 3-4 key issues remain the biggest challenges for DeFi to deal with in the coming months and years.
Yeah, it makes sense. The regulation, the criminal aspect or anonymity of it. So I've never heard this before, by the way. What is a rug pull?
So a rug pull is when a group of people start a decentralized finance project. That's not very hard to do. You could actually fork someone's code base, which means you take a copy of someone's code because everything is open source. You can make some small UI changes. Sometimes people make additional changes, add some features, and you can launch a project, while keeping the team anonymous. And because DeFi is mostly sentiment driven rather than fundamentals driven, people end up getting FOMO'd into buying some of these coins. And then once the coin value goes up, the team that had started the project will usually dump their tokens and disappear, or they will take assets out of these pools and disappear. And so one of the best practices is to do your own research. Don't just listen to people on Twitter or on social media or on the internet if they're trying to tell you about a DeFi project or any kind of investment for that matter. Make sure you do your own research and talk to experts in that area to avoid getting hit by one of these types of problems.
Yeah, the scammers are definitely a big issue.
I
feel like these guys have gone quite creative with the way that they try to steal money.
Yeah, this is something that usually happens with new technology. When the internet first came out, we had the Prince of Nigeria that ran rampant for years. And any kind of new technology faces similar challenges. When the bad guys get their hands on it, they come up with new and innovative ways to cheat people as well. So that's sort of the dark side of innovation.
Yeah, makes sense. You're right. It's with pretty much any kind of technology, any new technology, right? It's a good point. Okay, so those are some of the challenges, right? So given these challenges, is it possible that like DeFi could like fall apart, collapse, fail? Is that possible, or is this because it's decentralized, it's like impossible to like fall apart? Like, what's your take on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So with DeFi, this challenge will remain. Certain projects will fail. There will be certain bad guys who come in and then cheat, honest investors out of their money. But as a system, like you mentioned, it's achieved a certain threshold of decentralization across not just the institutional spectrum, but also, the consumer and front-end user spectrum. And so I think DeFi in its current state is decentralized enough that it's going to be very difficult for the entire industry to disappear. I think if we continue to see lack of regulation and we continue to see the similar issues that we've seen over the past 12 to 24 months continue, I suspect regulation will come in and make it a lot harder for people to get started or start projects within DeFi. But for it to disappear, chances are slim.
And you think that's because of decentralized kind of thing behind it, right? Like,
yeah,
stop kind of thing, right?
Exactly. So it's across borders, across nations, across different types of people and institutions. And when a movement gains that kind of momentum, it becomes very difficult to put the genie back in the bottle. And so I think with DeFi, we have already reached and crossed that threshold. We had already done that with crypto, but now with DeFi itself, just on top of Ethereum, networks like Celo or XDAI or Cardano, Algorand, you have several different networks, and they all have their mini ecosystems of DeFi forming on top of their blockchain technology. And then some like Ethereum actually have a layer 2 forming on top, which are scalability solutions that again have mini ecosystems surrounding them. And so from that perspective, it's extremely decentralized compared to where it was 12 or 24 months ago, or even 6 months ago. And it continues to grow, the number of users, the amount of money and assets locked in. And once you reach that, you've already crossed that point where it can be reversed.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess it's the way I think about it is kind of like Napster or like BitTorrent or something like that, right? I mean, we all know government tried really hard to shut those down, and I think they're still around. No, I mean, like,
yeah. So
BitTorrent
was actually bought by a China-based blockchain company called Tron. So Tron bought BitTorrent a couple of years ago, I'd say, or maybe last year. But anyhow, it is sort of the basis of peer-to-peer networks. And you're right, it becomes very difficult to shut these things down, especially when people figure out ways to do things in a cheaper, more efficient way. It's hard to get them to change their habits back to more inefficient and clunkier ways.
Yeah, I can download a movie for free online as opposed to having to walk into this back in the day, like DVDs, I guess, right? How to walk in a store, buy a DVD, and like, it's definitely much easier. It makes sense. I guess it's central, or DeFi is similar to that, right? In that it's cheaper, can be faster, has certain types of properties that are not possible with your bank, right? So that makes a lot of sense. Cool, awesome. So in your opinion, so is DeFi the future? Is it like an inevitable thing? Do you think that if like we're just all going to be using DeFi in the future, it's unstoppable, it's happening, we have a couple issues with it still, of course, but do you think it's just like inevitable that we're all going to be using DeFi?
Yeah, I think much like how the internet started, there were people that were resistant to it. And now people that think that they don't use the internet in some way or form are still utilizing it, through backend technologies or associated technologies. Anyone that does banking and is using the internet, anyone that's, doing any sort of web-based or even non-web-based activity has the internet linked into it. And I believe that DeFi will have a similar impact and will be as influential as the creation of the internet was. And the future is now, Rob. I mean, we're talking about it. I didn't know 5 years ago that I'd be working in an industry called DeFi because it didn't exist. 10 years ago, if you had told me I'd be having this interview with you, I'd probably call you crazy. So keeping that in mind, I think the amount of innovation we've seen, the level of interest we've seen across the board, it's very encouraging. And I think the future is here and it's now, and we're building it, and you're a part of it, and everyone else will be a part of it at some point in the near future.
Awesome, cool. The future is now. I like that. It's a good slogan. Cool, awesome. So I think we'll probably leave this video at that, and then we'll continue talking about some of the rest of the topics in other videos. So for those of you listening, make sure you check out the rest of the series because it's going to be a whole series of different things. Thanks, Uzi.
Thanks.